Good evening. At the beginning of the lecture, I shall Kumar Srivastava. Professor Srivastava was the life member and one of the vice presidents of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. He was also a member of the editorial board of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. He was an eminent scholar, teacher, and researcher in the field of social anthropology in the country. He was a modest person and always won the heart of others with his pleasant personality. He was an eloquent speaker and profile writer. He was always respectful to his seniors. Many qualities of life blended in one as he was. His contribution to the Kolkata Society for Asian Studies has been highly appreciated by the members of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. He encouraged this new organization and collaborated with it to organize a, a research methodology course, uh, a 10 days research methodology course with a guideline of ICSSR. When he was the director of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies. KSS organized a national seminar with Makayas during his tenure of directorship. After his retirement from Delhi University, he became the director of Anthropological Survey of India. In spite of his busy schedule, he always supported us with his wise advice and tried to contribute for the development of our society. He was a perfect administrator in professional life. His contribution to academic field is highly acclaimed not only in India but also in abroad. He received many prestigious awards from different academic and professional bodies. I am really grateful to Srimati Kumkum Srivastava, wife of Professor Vinay Kumar Srivastava, is present with us today. There is hardly any matching word to console his untimely demise. The members of our society share their deepest sympathy with the members of his bereaved family. Kolkata Society for Asian Studies is starting this lecture event from this year in memory of Professor Srivastava. This year, we are organizing the first lecture, which will be delivered by Dr. Satyabrat Chakraborty, President KSS. Dr. Satyabrat Chakraborty was former Deputy Director, Anthropological Survey of India, Kolkata. Presently, he is the General Secretary of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata. He served as a visiting faculty in the Vidyasagar University, Midnapur, West Bengal, and Arunachal University, Arunachal Pradesh. He has authored and edited many books and monographs. One of his remarkable books, published by Anthropological Survey of India, is Around the Plough, Agrarian Situation in India, second volume, a town in the rural milieu, Baruipur, West Bengal, and tribal India, agrarian system and agrarian laws. published by Anthropological Survey of India. Social Science and Social Concern by Mittal Publication, New Delhi. A few important edited volumes, among more. He has more than 70 published research papers in referred and peer-reviewed journals, along with more than 50 publications in referred peer-reviewed conferences and as edited work, book reviews, etc. In his credits, he is in the editorial board of Journal of the Indian Anthropological Society, Journal of the Asiatic Society, Science and Culture, and Journal of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. Professor Shiva Prasad Rambhatla, Honorary Professor, E-Learning Center, formerly Professor of Anthropology, Central University of Hyderabad, and the Advisory Board member of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, will preside over this meeting. The topic of today's lecture is Studies on Present Communities, Changing Time and Context. Hope you will be benefited enough. Professor Ranjana Rai, Vice President, Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, will deliver the vote of thanks. She is Professor Emeritus, University of Calcutta, and former Professor of Anthropology, University of Calcutta, Chief Editor of the Journal of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies. Welcome all the members and dignitaries of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, all the respected audiences, and our YouTube audiences to this lecture event. Now I invite Professor R. Shiva Prasad to preside over this meeting.
Thank you very much. I deem it as an honor to preside over this distinguished Professor Vinay Srivastava's memorial lecture being delivered by Professor Chakraborty, because he is a doyen also in anthropology. It is the time moves so fast, because as if it was yesterday he was with us. It has moved so fast, because almost it's November now. It's becoming 1 year in another maybe 2-3 weeks, which is just unfathomable. And he is, it's a personal loss apart from loss to the discipline. And he was like a springboard to me, and I also acted like a springboard to him on occasions. He used to write to me, and in fact, he used to send me his papers and says, "Shiva, give me your candid comments." You know, in fact, we had such kind of, I am almost like a brother to him. He used to treat me. In fact, he always used to tell me, "I'm older than you by 2 months." You know, that's you know, he was such a you know, human and very affable person. In fact, apart from academic qualities, he has excellent you know, human qualities. And even as administrator, I have always seen him more personalized administration rather than bureaucratic approach to administration. He always tried to help people. And in fact, our association with both the DNT commissions, where in fact I'm grateful to him, because when I first requested him, he happily obliged. And in fact, the first NK commission, we worked together. He did not get a single penny for his work, but he said, "No, I'm doing something. I don't bother about money about it." No, such a humble person, and it is, I think, befitting in his honor to have this first memorial lecture being delivered by Professor Chakravarti, because I don't need to say much about Professor Chakravarti, because he is not only very senior to all of us, but at the same time a distinguished scholar and a prolific writer even now. And now I request Professor Chakrabarti to deliver his lecture. Thank you, sir. Welcome for you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Respected Chairman, Professor Shiva Prasad Rambhatla, the Secretary, Office Bearers of the Executive Council, and the members of the Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, the Advisory Board members, and other committee members, its well-wishers, Professor Kumkum Srivastava, wife of late Professor Binoy Kumar Srivastava, and distinguished friends. Let me at the outset express my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers for inviting me for this first memorial lecture in honor of late Professor Binoy Kumar Srivastava, as well as for bestowing on me this difficult assignment by reposing their faith in me for this task. Personally, I feel myself extremely inadequate and unequal to the given responsibility. Friends, before the havoc of the prevailing pandemic situation set in, sometimes in March 2020, in a massive way, Professor Binoy Kumar Srivastava, the then director of the Anthropological Survey of India, a very lovable friend of mine, one day hinted to me that the foundation oration of the survey for the 2020 will have to be delivered by me. In the remotest imagination, it did never occur to me that this encouraging proposal will ever turn into a painful proposition by way of this memorial lecture on him due to the cruel infliction of COVID-19, which snatched his ever vibrant life little prematurely, bringing gloom to a person like me, who stands clearly 10 years elder to him. Therefore, notwithstanding my academic limitations, I accepted the request of the Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, where both of us got associated since few years back. The task became obviously challenging to me for more than one reason. First, choosing a topic, and next, doing justice to that. Binoy, in our generation, was one of the brilliant and foremost scholars, both as a dedicated teacher as well as an ardent researcher in anthropology, especially social cultural anthropology. He had a versatile interest, and the discipline particularly focused in theoretical and methodological issues based on various contemporary field situations. It would be eloquent from the list of his publications, professional as well as popular. His meticulous and critical touch in any presentation, either in print or in public communication, even in private discussions, were so lucid and immensely attractive. In the context of what I have narrated so far, let me pick up a broad theme based on my personal research engagements in cultural anthropology for the last several years. My special area of interest has been the study of peasant communities by and large. This interest got initially rooted in my thought when, as part of the postgraduate curriculum, we had to carry out a brief fieldwork for about 2 weeks during mid-1960s. During our term, we were taken into a Midnapur village, now Medinipur, near Kharagpur, West Bengal. My assignment was to study some Munda families in a village with special focus on their economic activities. Incidentally, that was a time when the Mundas were deeply involved in a festival, Sorai, related to the agricultural practices. Another requirement in the said curriculum was a special field for those who opted for cultural anthropology. This time, my assignment was to study kinship pattern and behavior among the Santals in a village situated near Belpahari, Midnapur district, West Bengal. In this case also, I could observe how this kinship network played an important role in their primary productive activities, that is, agricultural practices. This preliminary apprenticeship induced me to get fully involved at a later stage to study socioeconomic and cultural aspects of agricultural production in some villages of West Bengal and followed up through other related research programs carried out in some villages of South India, Northeast India, and Andaman Islands. In the backdrop of my academic interest mentioned above, I conducted a fieldwork between 1971 to 1973, centering around a village in the district of Bardwan, now Bardhaman, West Bengal. The village is situated in the agriculturally advanced region of the district known as the Rice Bowl, which was by then exposed to the modern inputs such as irrigation water through canal, deep and shallow tubewell, yielding variety of seeds, chemical fertilizers and insecticides, and so on. The region was covered under Intensive Agricultural District Program, IADP, since early 1960s. In other words, the prime time of the Green Revolution. Let me just mention in passing that the management of natural, mechanical, and manual water supply play very, very significant role in specific elevation of contiguous plots of land among different kinds of landowners. This itself is a separate subject of discussion, but I am not going into that right now. Meanwhile, I had quickly reviewed a number of available village studies as well as studies broadly on peasant communities at that point of time. Which haunted me most was that even though agriculture continues to be the primary source of livelihood of the largest number of rural population, there was hardly a detailed account of its socio-cultural context which sustained these major activities. I framed initially two questions to go about it. One, whether technology alone could help us understand the intricacies of this major organization of production for livelihood activities of a majority of rural population, or one was required to probe into other related socio-cultural parameters affecting the prevailing agricultural practices in specific field situations, even in the face of emergent techno-economic inputs. And two, in spite of a given inequality in the prevailing socio-economic structures in the agrarian productive base, how could the people still manage to continue with an apparent cohesive feeling of a moral community, mutually sharing many common cultural traits among themselves. A special focus of inquiry obviously remained in the center, which was the cognitive aspect of the people's perception, centering around the cultivation of land and management of its inputs, both in traditional as well as in the evolved agrarian milieu. Looking back, in order to capture the historicity of these questions posed above, Charles Metcalfe in 1832 as to the perpetuation of the village communities in India, which, in other words, were the peasant communities in India. I quote, "The village communities are little republics, having nearly everything they want within themselves and almost independent of any foreign relations. They seem to last where nothing else lasts. Dynasty after dynasty tumbles down. Revolution succeeds revolution, but the village community remains the same. This union of village communities, each one forming a separate little state in itself, has, I conceive, contributed more than any other cause to the preservation of the people of India. Through all the revolution and changes which they have suffered, as in a high degree conducive to their happiness and enjoy of a great position of freedom and independence." Unquote. Karl Marx, while indicating on the economic stagnation of India, observed that this source of stagnation lay in the isolated character of the Indian villages, which were known almost for their apparent economic self-sufficiency. Professor Nirmal Kumar Bose, a Gandhian scholar as well as renowned anarchist, in his various studies on the peculiarities of the caste mode of production in agriculture, primarily based his arguments in favor of a minimum social and economic security in the system, which was fortified by the cultural and religious autonomy by the respective participants as a formidable group in his major productive enterprise, that is, agricultural practices throughout the country. I may quickly take up a brief look into the survey on the village or peasant studies in India prior to and after independence. It is already known that Sir Thomas Munro, Karl Marx, Henry Maine, Baden-Powell brought into limelight in the world about the importance of the Indian villages during the early to late 19th century. P.C. Joshi's review in 1975 in Land Reforms in India covered in details of this survey during the pre- and post-independence period in India, done not only by the scholars, but even by the administrators, literators, social and political thinkers, and so on. The academic stimulations in social science research in this country reached through various sources from abroad. Systematic village studies, especially in the field of sociology and cultural anthropology, got a kickstart in the early 1950s onward. Mackie Marriott, M.N. Srinivas, S.C. Dubey's village studies came out in 1955, followed by F.G. Bailey, Ramakrishna Mukherjee in 1957, and Oscar Lewis in 1958. These studies were commissioned at a time when most of the scholars in sociology and anthropology were engaged with the issues of family, caste, kinship, ritual, etc. Even in the village studies just mentioned, these aspects were reflected primarily, including a bit of economic life. Some scholars in the 1960s and 1970s maintained a definite shift of emphasis subsequently on economic and political issues of rural India. For example, T. Scarlett Epstein, Andre Bethey, Dharmo Kumar, Kathleen Goff, Joan P. Mencher, and others. Indian Census Organization conducted nearly 500 village surveys during 1961 onward and typified them based on variant demographic and socioeconomic structures. A number of agroeconomic research centers in the country conducted farm management studies in terms of relationships between the input and output ratio. National Sample Survey also covered a good ground on terms of landholding pattern, livestock position, level of rural poverty, the condition of rural laborers, and so on and so forth in their different rounds in the 1970s. National Institute of Community Development, later renamed as National Institute of Rural Development, continued its interest in village studies mainly in terms of innovative characteristics of the progressive farmers. In the collection of 2,000 village studies conducted by the Village Studies Program, VSP, by the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, England, and nearly half of the total studies account for India. The mode of production in Indian agriculture became a major concern for the scholars in economics, history, political science, sociology, and anthropology during the 1970s and 1980s, and later on, peasant movements which had registered as another academic engagement of the scholars across many academic disciplines during this time. Before entering into other substantial aspects of my field observations, let me just point out to one very important issue in the theoretical discourse on village studies. A vital debate started with a question whether the village is a myth or a reality, posed by Louis Dumont and D. Pocock in 1957 in the journal Contributions to Indian Sociology. Their argument, among others, got around the criticality on village solidarity. Their emphasis was that the caste was the social reality in a village situation. N. Srinivas took a position in this context and emphasized that the village was the unit as observation center where one could study in detail the social processes and problems occurring in large parts of the country, if not in the greater part of the world. He mentioned, and I quote, the village is not only the architectural and demographic entity, but also a social entity in that the villagers have some loyalty to it. Rural Indians live in a system of complex loyalties. Each loyalty survives in a particular context. Unquote. One may like to juxtapose similar expressions made earlier on the village or village life propounded by our visionaries like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Mahatma Gandhi, or Rabindranath Tagore, and many others in this context. In the backdrop of this broad framework on village and peasant studies, I decided to probe into the initial question that were proposed for my empirical study in an agriculturally developed multi-caste village in the Burdwan district, West Bengal, as already mentioned, which was already exposed to various development programs related to the cultivation of paddy, mainly summer and winter variety, sustained by other crops like potato, jute, wheat, mustard, and various types of vegetables. I began by employing the existing tools of research, such as structured questionnaire, case studies, free observations, group interviews, and the like. I emphasized on the notional or perceptional aspects or ideas of the cultivators, that is, the cognitive aspect regarding each step and stage of cultivation, starting from preparing the land up to the harvest, including storing the product. The organization involved technical inputs used land around the entire agricultural universe, covering the management of livestock, handling of the seasonal climatic variations were also noted in detail. While comprehending the entire set of phenomena during the cultivation, it appeared that the panorama of agriculture was embedded in a unique situation. This could be easily divided into three main domains, namely technological, socioeconomic, and cultural. These three sets again may be taken into six operative parts, such as day-to-day field operations strategy, management of input, pattern of land management, organization of production, ritual obligations, and notional cognitive base. These dimensions are closely observable in a micro situation. In addition to that, there are other vital aspects related to the agrarian system, and they are basically historical and political economic in nature and are operative in the macro situation beyond the village. Put together, these endogenous and exogenous factors, these endogenous and exogenous factors make the entire agrarian social setup with all India dimension on the one hand and the regional or local context on the other. Over the years, I tried to understand more and more about the existing realities and the agricultural production in the specific context of my village studies in certain other areas also, as mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. Eventually, by and large, I noted that the majority of the cultivators managed to continue to a great extent their traditional agro-oriented moral and emotional living in spite of the massive technological changes due to mechanization of agricultural production as well as commercialization of its produce. The practitioners in this pursuit call them cultivator, peasant, or farmer, even though are variously placed in the local social hierarchy and are differentially affected by all the emergent factors of modernization, still share cultural traits in their ideas and practices. Therefore, in the same agroecological setting, they are apparently divided into two: encapsulated socio-cultural parameters, including their use of traditional technological know-how and characterized by labor-intensive production, self-consumption, and internal redistribution of produce for a meaningful and somewhat manageable living. The other, comparatively less in number than the earlier category, is externally impacted by a set of macroeconomic parameters, including the management of modern innovative inputs and characterized by capital intensive production, surplus generation, and marketization of produce for an emergent adaptive living. It may also be mentioned here incidentally that there is but a small number of cultivators who could be placed between these two distinct clusters for their tendencies behavior while adopting the modern inputs in a limited way. But on the whole, in a given village situation, all these groups individually as well as collectively tend to share a common agroclimatic environment and a common cumulative cultural value orientations inherent to the cultivation of land and its related other management practices. Their belief systems, ritual observances, use of local proverbial utterances, and many folk cultural usages put together help them building up a moral community of cultivators, whether landowners, sharecroppers, and marginal agricultural laborers, and the like. In a sense, they live and work under a natural and a supernatural cultural milieu, enmeshed in an age-old social complex of agrarian spectrum. Perhaps there is an innate impulse and also an imperative urge on their part to maintain this mutually cooperative and emotive living in spite of all the perennial contradictions inbuilt in the existing agrarian situation in the areas under study. Though some of them, because of various outside exposures, have to a certain extent absorbed certain urban behavioral characteristics in their otherwise long drawn rural pattern of living, yet they have not been fully internalized in the core of their inherited peasant culture. On the other hand, the majority of the cultivators, in the face of aggressive modernization in agriculture, feel virtually threatened and helpless by the increasing financial constraints for managing the modern inputs required for the new cultivation. This condition has been thrust upon them exogenously. They find no option suddenly to withdraw from themselves from the existing system, which has put them at the receiving end. This is the praxis as well as the predicament of the whole agrarian network. Let us now turn our attention to some macro factors affecting the agrarian structure and the agrarian system. The foremost among them is the land reforms in India. Since the independence, various land reforms measures have been announced and implemented both at the level of central and state governments, such as abolishing the Jamindari system, introducing the land ceiling measures on the one hand, and initiating various palliative measures, specially focusing on the relatively underprivileged section of the rural population engaged in the cultivation of land. The result so far has been less than satisfactory, notwithstanding the introduction of various schemes for specific target groups under various 5-year plan periods. I am not elaborating them here for the limitation of time for this present paper, but certainly I have data from Plan 1 to the latest one, where they have introduced various kinds of measures for the specific groups, marginal farmers, agricultural laborers, and sometimes need-based program, 20-point program, a lot of many things. I'm not going into details. I have primarily based my observations mainly from my direct field-based experiences in different locations of the country, as already mentioned in the beginning. While my initial focus was on the socio-cultural context of farming, yet my studies eventually touched upon the condition of the marginal farmers, sharecroppers, and the agricultural laborers in all the studied locations. In the overall context of the studies, there appear some common findings. So far, the conditions of the so-called rural poor are concerned. Though the system of sharecropping has been pronounced by its demise in capitalist countries, it has been still playing a very formidable role in a transitional multiplex agrarian system such as in India. They are variously known as Bataidar, Sajehadar in the north, Baramdar, Siknidar in the south, Borgadar, Adhiyar in the east, and Halopati in the west. The agricultural laborers also exist in all parts of the country in different names and identities. In the overall context of these studies, there appear some common findings. I have already touched on these points. And what happens? This follows beyond doubt that the question of poverty in India is basically characterized by the status of its rural population, who visibly remain below the poverty line, as well as belong to the social categories of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward castes, and so on. Sharecropping as a regular practice prevails in spite of the promulgated laws in different states abolishing it on paper. The numbers of agricultural laborers is not only increasing, but more often than not, they are deprived of the officially declared agricultural wages. The pace of increasing rate of production has not been commensurate with the target of judicial redistribution of food grains to the poor. Non-farm job opportunities have remained inadequate for suitably absorbing the surplus laborers from the field in other alternative engagements, and so on and so forth. This scenario exists almost commonly in all the studied locations so far, in spite of the massive investment made and periodic monitoring done. It appears unambiguously that at the height of liberalization, globalization, and privatization, the conditions of the so-called rural poor and marginal peasants have remained at a precarious level due to the lack of responsive politico-economic structure of governance in the country. I will now proceed towards the end of my discourse. As most of you might be already aware, that my friend Binoy was very keen in discussing theoretical context of any presentation. It was his passion in teaching as well as in research in cultural anthropology. It will be eloquent from his valuable publications, both in the form of papers or books, which number a huge volume. I repeat, a huge volume. I am not entering into that now. The Anthropological Survey of India perhaps could organize such discussions as a fitting tribute to his memory. However, let me reflect in brief as a synoptic summary on some theoretical postulates prevailing in the context of the studies on peasants and its relevance in the changing time. P.C. Joshi, in his brilliant survey I have already mentioned, brought out in historical perspective the importance of the subject. He had mentioned the major trends of research on agrarian situation before and after independence, citing references from across different academic disciplines. It established that this very subject was not an exclusive preserve of any particular discipline. Therefore, a lot of scholars from various academic backgrounds took interest in this discourse and contributed different ideas and concepts, some of which moved towards a probable theoretical construct. A few of them still holds good so far the existing reality is concerned. For example, Karl Marx's mode of production has been very critically reviewed, especially by a group of historians and economists for a long time. Apart from any other sources, the Economic and Political Weekly and the Journal of Peasant Studies together brought out many important papers with original insight on critical and analytical contributions for the last several years. Karl Polanyi's Reciprocity, Redistribution, and Market Exchange was embedded in the concept of being a social economy, being a socially instituted process. Economy being a socially instituted process. This led to a serious debate among the anthropologists who were divided into two clear schools of thought. One was substantivist, the other was formalist. A.V. Chayanov's Peasant Mode of Production, Daniel Thorner's Peasant Economy, Marshall de Chalin's Domestic Mode of Production were some of the other approaches to the study of peasant communities. Marx's Asiatic mode of production highlighted certain salient features where classical Indian village as a referent came to fit well. For example, self-sufficiency in agriculture and handicraft, the absence of surplus, little circulation of money, strong sentimental connection between village and the village community as obligated by the prevailing customary laws, weak formation of private property and capital, and so on. The village community occupied a central place. The village community occupied a central place in the concept of the Asiatic mode of production. If one probes singularly into the analytical and conceptual contributions of the anthropologists alone, one would meet with a number of such insights with regard to the studies on either village or village communities or interchangeably the peasant communities. For example, Robert Redfield's folk culture or peasant culture. From that, Eric's peasant rebellions, anthropological literature replete with such focal directions, having some theoretical implications. I'm not going into the other elaborations right at the moment on the citations of earlier periods. Much later, scholars like Michael Lipton, T.J. Byres, Henry Bernstein brought some newer angles into the study of peasant communities or agrarian question. The village studies unit at the Institute of Development Studies, Sussex, I have already mentioned it, they took a lead in this. T.J. Byres's seminal essay entitled The Agrarian Question and Differing Forms of Capitalist Agrarian Transition, an essay with reference to Asia, is a reference in point. Here's a special focus for India as a case study. In Indian context, the village or peasant studies, in other words, the changing agrarian relations over time, were very intimately carried out, combining both micro and macro milieu by T. Scarlett Epstein, Kathleen Gabb, Joan P. Mencher, M.N. Srinivas, Ramkrishna Mukherjee, Andre Bete, F.G. Bailey, and a host of others, to name only a few. They had focused on various social, cultural, economic, and political issues, mainly addressing the questions of social and economic inequality, factors of cultural cohesion or integrity, political polarization within the ambit of villages or village communities and beyond, and so on. Simultaneously, some historians, economists, and sociologists like R.S. Sharma, Irfan Habib, Harbans Mukhia, Daniel Thorner, A.R. Desai, Dharma Kumar, to mention only a few, made profound attempts in understanding the particular mode of production in Indian rural economy in historical as well as in contemporary context. Edmund Leach, a renowned anthropologist, once mentioned that organized cultivation started about 10 to 12,000 years back. 10 to 12,000 years back, archaeologists demonstrated that drainage and irrigation were associated with some of the very earliest forms of horticulture. It connects us immediately with Wittfogel's hydraulic civilization much later. Thus, it has been a long human history since then, combining the factors in economy, culture, polity, along the variety of historical social formations. In order to understand the agrarian performance, one needs to consider the agrarian systems along with the agrarian laws, agrarian programs, various reports of the committees or commissions, such as our recent reports like M.S. Swaminathan's Commission's report of 2006, Arjun Sengupta Commission report of 2007, Radhakrishnan Commission report 2008, and others. Finally, the interplay of capital vis-a-vis the management of environment has been another changing dimension of studying the problematics of agrarian situation. In the core of it, in the core of it, the question of food security. The question of food security has been a central concern. The later part of 20th century has been marked by the huge number of cases of farmers' suicide in our country, vis-a-vis the substantial amount of farmers' subsidy in the United States. Kindly note it. The latest World Conference on Environment, that is COP26, just concluded at Glasgow, could only indicate the direction for searching out the appropriate answer to these disturbing questions. I stop here by mentioning only the latest and the longest struggle of the peasants or farmers in our country, right in front of our nose, and its victorious end. And its victorious end would bring back the importance of the agrarian issues responsible for the overall development of our future. For the overall development of our future. To conclude my presentation of this evening, let me, ladies and gentlemen, once more reiterate that micro-level field situations which present the unique phenomena of socio-economic intricacies and interactions among different sections of rural cultivators in different agroecological regions perhaps suggest to study with greater clarity of the more wider macro-dimensional agrarian questions, such as the major mode of production and its many regional varieties in Indian agriculture in contemporary changing context as well as a changing time frame. Thank you everybody for kindly tolerating me for such long. Thank you very, very much.
I think it is a brilliant summary of the whole scenario. At the same time, the processes that have happened, and because I'm much more touched because I was teaching for about 25 years on peasant society in the university, and it is such a vast area. But putting the whole thing into a nutshell, and at the same time giving the depth of information is quite important. In fact, what we find, on different aspects, he was actually touching upon the socio-cultural aspects of the production. In fact, we also touched upon the theoretical, the mode of production debates, right from China and who opened, because the Russian agricultural scientists, agricultural economists have started the whole idea of peasantry as a mode of production. And at the same time, how oral cultures, certain aspects of oral culture survive, because peasant cultures are largely oral cultures. And what we find is, in fact, I recall during my working with Professor Srinivas, he used to tell me, India doesn't have a cattle policy. You have huge cattle markets, cattle listings. In fact, these are all important aspects for policy to be entertained. And then these are the things which are brought out in the village studies. In fact, it's an excellent summarizing of the whole processes. In fact, what I observe is the Green Revolution was the one which has affected the peasant life drastically, in the sense that though even today the peasant farmers have the peasant mindset, they are not really peasant in that sense, because they are completely under the clutches of the market. In fact, I don't think I should take much time on this. If you look at Manning Nash talks about the peasant markets, how peasant markets are intertwined with the global markets, and how the peasant becomes, because traditionally peasants were controlling the market, but now peasants don't control the market. It is the market controls the farmers. Production is for the not sustenance anymore, part of it. In fact, it's a beautifully summed up, saying that the condition of the rural, peasants, especially laborers and the tenant farmers, and the kind of conditions are so awful. In fact, the end of the lecture was brilliant because now I think the farmers' movement has brought to the center stage the peasant issues or the agricultural issues. And thank you very much for such a brilliant talk. I know in that short time you can't go much more beyond that level, but at the same time, compressing all that, it's like encyclopedic kind of a presentation with insights. Since it is a memorial lecture, I do not know whether we should have questions on this, but I think maybe we could write to Professor Chakraborty, because there are many things that he just glanced at and told that there are many more we cannot present it in a short lecture. And but it is definitely a fitting memorial lecture in memory of late my friend Professor Vinay Kumar Srivastava, and I'm sure you can bring it out as a good memorial kind of a publication that will be befitting to also make it widely publicized to the friends of Professor Vinay, as well as to the fraternity of anthropologists, as well as others. In fact, the peasant society is such a kind of area which is multidisciplinary. It has, right from Hobsbawm and others, many have, historians have worked, economists have worked. In fact, the Pranab Bardhan's writings on dialogue between anthropologists and economists is an initiative that has come in this kind of way. And I have no words further to express my sincere thanks to Professor Chakraborty for such a wonderful first memorial lecture. I think the opening is so beautiful. I hope the next year onwards, we will maintain the similar kind of tempo and the gusto of lectures.
Sir, excuse me, may I just wish to thank Dr. Satyabrata Chakraborty, and he was apologetic that, he kept us, hooked to our, the screen for such a long time. But if, sir, knew Professor Srivastava, you would know, and all of you here, I think, who knew him and have heard him speak, you would vouch for that he could carry on for 6 hours. There have been marathon sessions which he had taken in classes plus lectures. So even if you had carried on for another hour, sir, I was quite used to it. And in fact, it would have been a wonderful way to, remember him all the more, because this was his style, He was unmindful of time, and he would just, carry on, because whenever I used to, ask him, why are you, you were just speaking on and on. So he said, no, I don't, I was, clarifying my, it was a self-clarification more than a lecture. So every time, he would use the same sort of defense when he went beyond time. So thank you very much, Mr. Chakraborty. We could have actually carried on, and it would have been wonderful. It was wonderful, and it would have been a pleasure to for another half an hour or so. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
You are muted, Professor Ranjana.
Yes, thank you. I think this is my opportunity now to give thank. I was really listening to Dr. Satyabrat Chakraborty's background, and the topic that he had chosen to speak, it was really up to the heart of Professor Vinay Srivastava, because he was also very much interested in all kinds of people, and especially those who were downtrodden and other things. Because I was just telling Mr. Srivastava that I remember he used to send many of his papers to me. And the one I remember that was for those who were cleaning the night soils, the people who were cleaning the night soils in Delhi. He made a paper, and it was really something that one can think about those people who are really downtrodden. And today I'm really thankful for Mrs. Srivastava to be here and to have spoken also about her experience. Professor Srivastava was known to me. I knew him for a long time. Whenever I used to go to Delhi as an examiner or for any other capacity, they were always there welcoming me. And then we were fortunate to have him for a short while amongst us in Kolkata as an administrator. But he was downright an academician, and he loved his work. He loved to mix with people, with all kinds of people, and for field work, he was a great person. And I would like to thank Professor Shiva Prasad Ramala to be the chair, to be in the chair and to conduct the whole session. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. It was very good to see you again, once again. And then to our main speaker, Dr. Satyabrat Chakraborty, who has pointed out also about the downtrodden people who are, we don't think about them, mostly about by whose labors we get our nourishment, we sustain ourselves, but how they are neglected. And he has given a vast view of village study of agrarian community from his own experience, and also from the kinds of work that had already been done, and also with the suggestion that the future generation should also take up this kind of work. And I'm sure Professor Vinay Srivastava would have appreciated much, very much. And since he has gone that the other day, it seems like, and I cannot, while thanking, I cannot think that he's not here. And then thank you very much, Dr. Chakraborty, for your wonderful lecture. After a long time that I'm listening to your lecture. Usually I get to listen to a small ones, just introductions and things like that. It was really enjoying. Thank you very much on behalf of Kolkata Society. I'm thanking you. Then I thank all the eminent, distinguished audiences. I don't know whether I can, in a webinar, I can address them as audiences, but definitely I'm thankful to all of them. Perhaps there had been many comments or suggestions that they could have made on this very important topic. Thank you very much for all of you to be present here, and it's quite a good gathering who has come to listen to this first Vinay Srivastava Memorial Lecture. And then I am thankful to Kolkata Society for Asian Studies for giving me this opportunity to offer thanks to all the people. And I thank Shormishta Debasu and all the other members of Kolkata Society for Asian Studies for organizing, not only for organizing this lecture, but also giving all of us to have this opportunity remembering, not only remembering to Vinaya Shastri, but in a grand way, in a very academic way, which he should have liked, which he always did, and with my deep respect to the departed soul and my sympathy for his wife. I know it is very difficult for her to forget such a wonderful person. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. With this,
Is it over?
Shall we start?
with this,
You can say when
yeah.
So I suppose since I have given the vote of thanks, I suppose it is over. With all my due respect to all of you and to the departed.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh,
Thanks to the chair especially. And thanks to the brilliant lecture given by Dr. Chakravorty.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful one.
Wonderful, really wonderful, wonderful. So, good night to you all.
Thank you, sir. Shiv Prasad, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it was wonderful lecture. We all enjoyed.
Yes, sir.
It's a great beginning. Okay, sir. Good night.
Good night.